Okay, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the verse 31, the last verse of the chapter. In previous translations, uh, the chapter break did not include verse 31. By that I mean the new paragraph didn't start with verse 31. Instead, it started with 13:1. And that was kind of not the intention of Paul. So, as you know, chapters and verses were later inserted in the Bible, and they did a good job. But sometimes they did make mistakes where, translation and putting chapters and verses are done by human beings. So, they do that to the best of their ability and judgment. But as scholarship develops and increases over time, the scholars find, hey, that's not the best way to translate this. It's better if we translate it this way. So that's why in English versions, at least, we get a new version, meaning new translation. And translation always is subjective of the person who's translating. So as Bible scholars, we constantly try to seek what's the original meaning of the writer. Because when you translate, you got your personal view, opinion, and usually they do a good job, but at times it changes somewhat the whole context. So you'll know what I mean when it's included in the above chapter, verse 31, and now I'll show you the most excellent way. And then if I speak in tongues, it's like, what was the excellent way? And then he continues his talk about the gifts that he previously been talking about in the chapter 12. But when you put it in the next paragraph, and now I'll show you the most excellent way, and then, he's going to talk about that. He made a statement, and he's going to explain what he just said. So could be, not that important or interesting for you, but when you study the Bible seriously, those things do matter. For instance, in Ephesians chapter 6, where Apostle Paul talks about the relationship between husband and wife. Yeah. And usually the translations begin with, husbands, love your wife. Yeah. And wives, submit to your husband. But in that discussion, Paul summarizes in the beginning of that paragraph by saying, submit to one another. See, so people that really don't know much about Bible translation, all that, they say, oh, it's Bible teaches sexism. Huh? It says, submit to your husband. And husband, love you. That's kind of condescending. So it's important to point out, in Paul's time, 2,000 years ago, there's no equality between man and woman, husband and wife. So in that backdrop, Paul makes a striking, a comment, suggestion, says submit to one another. Had never seen it in other places in life back then. Huh? Women were treated as a second class human being. I mean, as recently as 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years, women in this country didn't have the right to vote. Hmm? So, I have been on the front line of women's rights and equality. I'm out there, uh, but my view wasn't taken uh, very well among the conservative uh, side of the Christianity. What do you say? What do you mean? Yeah, women. They still have. Even in uh, you know early 21st century, there are plenty of churches that would argue that women are supposed to be submissive to men. So that's why there are no women elders, there are no women pastors, and there are no women teaching adult male Bible classes. It's a serious thing. And implication of that is huge. Uh, so you would think, in this day and age, a young women would actually accept that? Yeah, sure. Uh, there are plenty of churches in Washington area that will teach their uh, uh, women, wives, to get ready when their husband is coming home, and of course, men are the breadwinners, and women stay home. That's their job is to raise children and do homeschooling and the whole package. Hmm? And they recommend that women get ready and put some makeup on and attractive clothes when their husband comes home. And their argument is, hey, when your husband go to work, all these women are very you know dressed up and uh, looking attractive, and you come home and you've been playing with kids and taking care of the house, and you're a mess, you know uh, that kind of thing. It's so to me that was a sort of life-changing statement. Whether you put that submit to one another in the front or at the back of the previous section. And when you in literal sense, when you look at it, it doesn't make any sense to put it in the back of the previous paragraph. It just doesn't. Yeah, but who translated the Bible? Men. And they didn't like the fact that submit to one another, in the context of family setting. So they put it at the end of the previous uh, paragraph and began the new one with wives, submit to your husbands. So this is one of those. And now I'll show you the most excellent way. If I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Um, Obviously, he's talking about spiritual gifts, but we can relate to the ability that we have, just natural ability. When you were born, you had some traits that you were born with naturally. You could be smart. You could be artistic. You could be musically oriented, sports. Uh, it doesn't really have to be spiritual gifts. You've been endowed by God when you were born with traits of um, kind of ability that is somewhat unique to you. Mm. And oftentimes, what happens, those gifted people, talent people, use it for their glory, use it for their fame, use it for their, ability to produce wealth. Uh, and God says, you could have a lot of money, you could have fame and success, but if you have no love, it means nothing. You are nothing. But the standards and the values that the world have is crooked and corrupt. So, as sinful men, sinful women, that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to lord it over people, abuse and misuse, and sometimes just use them for their benefit. I mean, when was the last time that the people would go to work and feel like their employer really loves them? Oh man, I feel loved here. Huh? My boss loves me. I'm sure it happens to a few people, but that's not why you go to work. They load it over and boss you around because they pay you. And they'll say, you're an employee and I pay you, so do your job. Don't expect me to thank you. Don't expect me to love you. You're not here to be loved. But we can understand that. That's the broken world. But in the church, when God has gifted you with spiritual gifts to serve one another and to build one another up, He's saying it has to be done in love. Otherwise, you can manipulate, you can abuse, you can use people for your own sake. That's not love. So he's saying, you could have the greatest gifts. You can speak in tongues of men and angels, and you can move the mountains, and how great your faith is, and all that. But if you have not love, you're nothing. You will. So, uh, without exaggerating too much, I think on the face value, he said, I don't care how important you are, how famous you are, how powerful you are, how much success and admiration you get from people. If you don't do it in love and you just are seeking for your own success and glory and fame and a lot of times money, you're nothing, man. People wouldn't be able to know that, and some people may even know, but that they ignore it and let you go ahead and do that and make you feel more powerful. You almost become an idol, and you use people. You get the people that are really poor and they only have a couple $100 in their bank account, and you persuade them to give $200 telling them God will pay you back tenfold, 60-fold, hundredfold. And they go home and they give the money, and yet when they don't receive anything that the person suggested, who are they gonna appeal to? What are they gonna do? Is that love? I mean, if you really truly believe that God will repay you for whatever you give, then you should preface it to say before you say that, say, I'll pay you back. You can this money back guarantee. Okay, if you didn't get as I said, hundredfold, I'll give you the money back. Wouldn't that be nice? Huh? If you weren't healed and I claim that you were, you go home, find out that it was all just emotional excitement, your condition hasn't changed, and you report that back to me, then at the next meeting, I'm going to, come out and say, at the last meeting, claimed that this person was healed, and obviously he or she is not. I take it back. There may not have been an intentional lie, but that was borderline deception. Then you're doing it in love. And, the grief that I have, even, as I get older, the stuff that Christians do to each other within the uh, community setting, and what the Christian leaders do to their followers is no more different than the world. I mean, uh, who doesn't like 1 Corinthians chapter 13? They nickname it as, this chapter of love. We like it. A lot of people even memorize this chapter. We get all goosebump. It's nice to hear, nice to sing about. But when you actually engage in everyday life among Christians and Christian community, it's not that evident. And then he goes on to explain the nature, characteristics of this love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. I mean, every list that we go through here, I kind of feel, guilty all over. Because I am what this chapter describes as love, I'm not. I'm not that patient. I could give an impression like I'm patient, but I'm not that patient. I try to be kind, but not all the time. Much easier for me to be kind to those that are kind to me. But for almost nothing at all, I get upset. It does not envy. Oh my goodness. Christians are, you know, really bad about jealousy, envy. It was from the beginning of humanity. You know, the first murder happened because Cain was jealous of his brother Abel. Just jealous. How jealous? Well, jealous enough to kill his own brother. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But there are prophecies they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now there are three remain. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I mean, you don't have to be a theologian to know why love is the greatest. When we go to heaven, we no longer have to hope. All our hopes have become reality. We don't have to hope anymore. Faith, we don't need it anymore. We live in the reality of God Himself. We don't need to believe. We're there. But love will still be a thing that keeps all of us together. Not in a temporary, moment to moment kind of love, but eternal love. So, conversely, you could say what he said about the characteristic and the nature of love uh, that we find lacking in our own lives, and sometimes as Paul described, I do what I don't want to do. I want to love, but I do the reverse. I'm easily angered. I'm impatient. I'm rude. I'm not kind. I remember all the wrongs that people have done to me. Conversely, when we go to heaven, these qualities won't exist anymore. I mean, I couldn't envy even if I tried. Because God will change us completely. Now we know in part. We grow in part. Not there yet to be perfect, but perfection will be there when I go to heaven. Because we won't be governed and ruled and affected by our sinful nature. So perfection is coming. Meanwhile, he says, therefore, use the gifts that I gave you, not for your benefit, not so that you can boast how good you are, how important you are, how much in need you are, but just love. Love never fails. And finally, he says, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. We have the privilege and blessings of having grandchildren. They're at the age still where they're so innocent. I mean, that doesn't mean they're not sinful, but innocent, so innocent. It just amazes me to watch them. But I say with a slight sense of regret, I said, I wish you don't grow up anymore. Huh? This is just good. They say things that they know, but they are very limited. And yet they have strong will and there's strong knowledge and very strong sense of righteousness. It's cute. But as they develop and grow older, they can't remain there. There is going to come a time when that is no longer cute. Huh? We call it rebellion, okay? So stop it. Including myself, I see in the church world people that just stop growing. They live the rest of their Christian life like a baby. Act like baby, think like baby, behave like baby. And they expect other people, even from God, to treat them as babies. It's painful to, number one, acknowledge that. Number two, see how damaging it is. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. It's childish ways. I don't think God was playing word games, but at a certain point, God says, be like a child. Okay? Well, a child is going to act like child, meaning it is going to be childish. Is that what God is saying? Be childish? Obviously not. So there's a difference between being childish and being childlike. You think innocent and pure. Childlike faith. But instead, when you go to church, you see all kinds of uh, uh, adults in natural chronological age as well as emotional age. They think they're, I'm an adult. Don't tell me what to do. I'll read the Bible myself. I'll decide what that means. Good. That's the privilege that God gave you. You have brain to think. You're an individual, and God treats you as an individual believer. But as Paul says, when I became an adult, I put childish things away. That means learn to respect one another. That means learning how to honor one another. And have that childlike attitude toward God. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. However, then we shall see face to face. You guys probably don't, unless you really think about it, don't relate to what Paul just said. We see a poor reflection on the mirror. Hey, excuse me, the mirrors that I have, they're just so good. They show me stuff that with my natural eyes cannot. I mean, that's the kind of mirrors we have. But back then, when Paul is talking about mirrors, it's not the 21st century mirrors that we have. It's a, just shining object. Something that you can have a resemblance of reflection. So when they see what they call mirror, it wasn't that accurate. And God is saying, when you're a child, your worldview is not going to be reflected in the right way that it actually is. It's going to be not clear. But when you grow up, become an adult, it will become clearer and clearer. I know in part, but then I shall know fully. I mean, all these qualities would cause us to stop and ponder and reflect and say, why am I so proud? Why am I so arrogant? Why do I think I know so much? Huh? I have opinion about just about everything. Huh? And I respond and I behave according to what I see and what I sense, and I think that's really all there is. And that's one of the things that's actually wrong with this world. People give them credit, and they don't have right to give themselves so much credit. You don't know that much. You're just looking at things out of that small box that you've experienced in your life. I mean, the ideologues that argue on TV, I wonder, how many third world countries have you actually visited? What do you know? And yet you act like you speak like you're an expert, and somehow you have insights and clear paths to improve their life? Really? I mean, before you shout either pro Israel, pro Palestine, have you ever visited, talked to the people who live there? We're talking about human beings. So if you heard both sides, you wouldn't so easily be pro Israel because some politicians argue that that's our ally and we have to be on their side. And neither will you try to uh, draw a picture of Palestinian uh, extremists as innocent, naive people, but they won't do that. And that's just one international politics example in the present day. But that's just one of so many areas where so-called leaders, including our presidential candidates, they speak with so much authority, and I'm saying, have you ever visited and spent real, not just as a state representative, guest of this country, but actually visit and talk to the people, find out why they were so angry, and it is so deeply rooted in thousands of years of history, and no accord, no treaty will make it right. And you go in with American perspective, and you don't even know the history that well anyway. And actually, the experts cringe at some of the things you're saying. Hey, Chalan, oh, where'd you get that shirt?
That's 1201.
Looks good, man. Yeah. So this, it has always been that way. That's human nature. But, just in recent days, uh, people are acting so much childish. It's not even funny. So we need to live the kind of life that Paul had just suggested in this chapter. It's not a romantic, sentimental idea. It's an idea that should be practiced, put into practice immediately in all that we do. We're not going to become mature and all grown up overnight. It's going to take many, many years, and sometimes it would take lifetime and still don't see that much progress. But you have to allow yourself for the Holy Spirit to come and to mold you and to work on you so that you become more loving, patient, kind, humble. And then perhaps we have hope. So everything in love. That's the most excellent way. If you only have one talent, but you practice that talent in love, that's better than someone who has 10 talents and practice them for his own good, for his selfish reasons. That's nothing. That's what the Bible said, right? You're nothing. You're nothing. But if you have one and do it in love, then you have a spiritual fruit. So let's go out there and practice our gifts that God gave us to change the world. God doesn't have any plan B. When Jesus left and ascended into heaven, he had about 500 people that understood, and that was it. Let's pray. Father, we're thankful that we have the privilege of storing your spiritual authority and power and gifts as your children. Help us to use them wisely, humbly, and in love. May our lives be a light in the darkness. And may the world benefit just because we are here as your instrument. In Jesus' name, amen.